Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I am recording this on January 25th. There's a big snowstorm that's happening right now in New York, and we're going to go over the news. Please help support the work that I do by making sure you subscribe to all of the channels. I have YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can follow me on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can listen to my archive audio podcasts under broadcast radio. You can watch the live streams on broadcast live, and you can read the news that's being generated through broadcast paper on my website. You can also follow me on TikTok, Substack, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, lots of ways to follow my work. You can follow me on X and on GETTR. Please share the links and ask your social media to follow me so I can grow the channel. In addition, tonight I should be doing a live stream with John Hogue. So please watch that. That should be at 10 p.m. New York time, Eastern time. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. If you would like, you can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. So lots of ways to support the work that I do. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please get the great supplements that I offer. I use these products every day to slow down the aging process. This is an affordable way to actually slow down the aging process, boost up your immune system and your endocrine system, help with your vascular system and brain function. I have a great structural nanosilver toothpaste that you can get. Get a few tubes of this for your household. This is the best toothpaste that you can get. Has no fluoride. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, remove that plaque, neutralize, improve your oral cavity, and that will help to improve your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. This is the best toothpaste that you can get. And because it does neutralize your oral cavity, this is perfect to take during the winter season. Super important. Get a few tubes of this structural nanosilver toothpaste. I also have structural nanosilver gels. You can get it in the tube form or the quick dispenser form. Have it in your bag. You never know when you need it. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your nose, around your ears. Lightly coat your nostrils. So stay active for 5.5 hours. If you have a cut, an abrasion, a minor burn, put the gel on the lesion. It'll help to heal it. And you can use this daily to help with the health of your skin. So please go to my store and get the silver gels. They're dual purpose. And I have structural nanosilver soaps. You can get it in lemongrass, charcoal tea tree, and in peppermint. Get a few bars for your household. They're very high quality structural nanosilver soaps that will help to improve the health of your skin and neutralize. Super important, especially during the winter season. All right, with that said, let's listen in on what's going on with the mass protests in Minnesota.
Tax experts are here. Now you can use a TurboTax expert in your community. They can do your taxes and get you every dollar you deserve. Local tax experts are here. Hand off your taxes with confidence.
Anti-ICE protests raging in Minneapolis after another deadly shooting involving a federal agent who DHS says was acting in self-defense. Governor Tim Walz pointing a finger at President Trump, demanding that, quote, violent, untrained officers be removed from his state immediately. Sam Olson is the ICE field office director in Minnesota. He joins us now. Sam, thank you for taking time today and to point out you have decades of experience in ICE in the state of Minnesota. What's your reaction? Is this chaos? Is this tragic shooting, yet another one, making your task of removing violent criminal illegal aliens from the streets of Minnesota more difficult?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've worked in Minnesota for the past 20 years, right? And yesterday was another unfortunate incident. You know, no officer wakes up in the morning and hopes to have to use any type of force, let alone deadly force. And now this happened, and again, that this happened because of kind of what we're seeing around here with a lot of these agitators, these vigilantes, kind of surrounding the officers on the street. It's like nothing I've ever seen before working here in the past 20 years.
Sam, we hear from some politicians and critics saying that, you are just going after anybody on the streets. But talk to me about when we hear there's a target list, who's on that list?
Right. In ICE, we do targeted enforcement now, and we've done targeted enforcement the past 20 years that I've been here.
The bottom line is that the protesters and inhibiting the ICE officers, the sheriffs, even local enforcement, on doing their job. It's a problem. The government's not at fault here. The bottom line is ICE is in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, to get rid of illegal aliens. And you have citizens, quote, citizens within these neighborhoods trying to inhibit legal law enforcement. So who are they for? The citizens. Are they for the illegal aliens? Or are they for actually the rule of law?
Unfortunately, here in Minnesota, we have a lot of targets. I think right now we're sitting on over 60,000 cases that have final orders of removal or in some part of the immigration process, with about 5,000 of them being criminals. So we have a lot of targets, unfortunately, and those are the ones we're focusing on, right? We look through and have priorities. While there has been a surge of resources here, we're still limited in resources, so we'll focus on the criminal aliens who are the worst of the worst and go down the line from there. Immigration law demands us to take action on certain types of aliens that are here, and that's what we're charged to do, and that's what we will do.
And Sam, earlier in the show, I was walking the wall behind me showing some of those worst of worst. Assaulted teenage children, sexually assaulted them. One individual from El Salvador convicted of 3 homicides, and the list goes on. Would it simply be the case that none of this would happen if these sanctuary jurisdictions like Minneapolis would cooperate with you guys in a peaceful manner and hand them over?
Exactly.
And look, cooperation helps. Any type of law enforcement cooperation, I think, is paramount for public safety, whether that's state, local, federal. It all helps. What I have seen here, thankfully, is just an increased level of cooperation throughout the state, right? I have meetings recently with the Metro Sheriffs, with the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, and we have been in talks to figure out how we can cooperate on these and how we can ensure that the immigration enforcement, which I'm charged with, how we can do that better with their help, right? When we ask for cooperation, we're not asking for these agencies to do our job for us, because we're fully capable of doing that, and now we have the resources to do it. But what we do need is just a level of communication, coordination, and then a cooperation. So when they do come across somebody who is amenable to an immigration enforcement action, that we can get that data and take an action.
That is great news to hear, Sam, that there are some jurisdictions, some of them sanctuary jurisdictions, starting to cooperate. Just lastly, in the time we have left, what would you say these protesters have now turned clearly into violent agitators, spurred in part by the local politicians like the mayor, like the governor? But if you could talk human to some of these protesters that are out there, they're interfering, impeding, insulting, do you have a message for them?
Most of our time we spend here focusing on the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. But if we look at the First Amendment, right, I think that the right, it doesn't read the right to protest, right? It's the right to peacefully assemble. And when we're out there, we have no problem with, the public watching what we do, filming what we do, talking to us while we do it. But there is that line, though, when they start to impede and get in situations where, frankly, we don't want them to be, we can't have them to be kind of in our workspace. that's when we have issues. Unfortunately, too, some of the agitators that are doing it, they're not peacefully protesting. Some of the things that our officers hear on a daily basis getting screamed at them, you know what I mean? I just commend their professionalism as they go along, because they're getting bombarded with this from megaphones. We're seeing threats. We just had a threat last night again. I've had to go through threats and reading them that they were coming after people's families, going to burn their houses down, burn their families alive. These are the type of threats that the officers are facing. And that's not a peaceful protest. Those aren't peaceful assemblies at all.
Not at all. Sam Olson, Minnesota ICE Field Office Director, thank you for taking time, and hope your men and women out there in the streets will remain safe. Thank you, sir.
Hey, everyone.
The bottom line is this: we have illegal aliens in this country that need to be removed. That's the law. And these people that are protesting should get out of the way. If they get hurt, it's their own damn fault. It's that simple. All right. We have a big snowstorm that's coming, and New York at this moment in time, as I'm recording, is in a whiteout. It's totally a blizzard right now.
Icy conditions are causing power outages across the country, particularly in the south. Tom Arsenault is the mayor of Shreveport, Louisiana, which saw temperatures as low as 21 degrees today. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. First of all, just let me know, what does it look like there right now?
Well, we had a second wave come in last night, so it looks very pretty outside of my house, but very dangerous for anyone trying to pass on the road. So we will see. I think we got mostly sleet. Didn't get as much freezing rain, which has probably helped reduce the number of people that are out and about, and also reduce the power outages for our community. I'm very fortunate to have power this morning, and we seem to be running along fine. We've got tremendous public works people that are out and about. They'll be out as soon as the sun comes up to try and clear some of the roads, but it is far too dangerous to get out on any of our roads today.
Right. So most of your power outages are due to freezing rain and sleet on power lines that have come down. The grid is holding up okay.
The grid seems to be holding up just fine. I think we got instead of a lot of freezing rain, we got lighter precipitation than that. Got sleet and a little snow. So the transmission grid seems to be holding out. So what we have basically is isolated places where either lines have snapped or tree limbs have fallen. But it seems to me that most of the places, most people still have power. I'm not seeing a lot of Facebook posts and social media posts of people without power, but I know that there are some.
When was the last time you got weather like this, and what are the temperatures going to look like over the next week?
The last time we got a real storm like this was in 2021, but it was sustained. It was 10 days. And we learned a lot of lessons from that, and as a result of it, we are better prepared this time. We have backup generators for our water system that have been installed, and we're prepared for this much better than we were in 2021. That lasted about 10 days. We had snow on the ground for about 10 days. It was very, very unusual for us. We are expecting to maybe get above freezing tomorrow. We won't get there today, which means that our conditions will not improve today at all. It's forecast to be sunny tomorrow, but still cold. And so we may have some melting, but our first relief probably comes on Tuesday, and we'll be in the teens, which is very cold for us. Yeah. We'll be in the teens tonight and Monday night.
Very cold for Shreveport, Louisiana. Mayor Arsenault, thank you so much for the update. Stay safe.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews.
What I'm noticing in New York right now, the streets are full of snow. It's in some areas we have probably about probably about maybe an inch or two. It is the wind is coming in. It's a whiteout kind of situation. It's like a blizzard. It's hard to actually remove the snow because the falling of the snow is pretty heavy at the moment. Probably will maintain this fall of snow until about 2 o'clock. I'm recording this at around 10:46 right now a.m. So New York's going to have a decent amount of snow, more than I've seen in a while. And this supposedly in the late afternoon, early evening should be icing over. So it's going to stay for a few days. Okay, with that, let's go to Fox News talking about Minneapolis' shooting victim lacked common sense.
Well, Chief Chris Clem joining us now. Chris, talk to us, walk us through your take on sort of what transpired yesterday in this tragic shooting, but also the larger context of why ICE even needs to be there in Border Patrol and how this chaos is possibly avoided. Sundays just got.
Well, good morning, Griff, and I'll tell you, we'll start with that first question. What we're witnessing and seeing all the videotape of yesterday's incident, tragic. No one in law enforcement wants to have to use deadly force. But Mr. Pretti made a series of bad decisions. You know, the Constitution protects him to carry, but common sense should be guiding him when he's out there doing that. And that he lacked that yesterday. Agents had a reason to deal with him. He was actively resisting. He was assaulted. He was combated. It looked like they went to take him down. Obviously, he was fighting them. And you know, again, as the videos we've seen, you know, show different actions. We've got more to follow up on. But what he did put agents in a situation where they had to use deadly force. It's unfortunate, but again, as you mentioned earlier, and as Charlie mentioned, this guy made all those decisions. Had he just been standing back filming instead of engaging like that, especially when he's got a firearm, you know, that could have changed some things. To the second point, and it's great that you've captured that, and I'm so glad we have the recordings of the governor, because we'll use that too when it comes down to looking at 8 U.S.C. 1324, aiding and abetting, and also 18 U.S.C. 111 on the assault and PD, you know, interfering. But we're here because of 4 years of ridiculous open border policies, catch and release, fake asylum claims, and over 100,000 people on the ICE docket, to include 33,000 people with orders of removal and over 11,000 criminals, convicted criminals that ICE is looking for in Minnesota and a lot in that Minneapolis area. So again, this is their policy, their leadership that has failed the American people and Minnesotans, why ICE has to do what they have to do in Minnesota.
Yeah, and Chris, it certainly seems that the governor and the mayor have a role to play now to try and not continue to call this a mostly peaceful protest, when we are seeing the conditions that drives an ICU nurse into a confrontation with ICE and law enforcement, federal law enforcement, while armed with a 9mm handgun. Chris Clem, thank you so much for your insight today. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
All right, let's listen to CNN talking about the video shows the agent taking the gun from the Minneapolis victim.
CNN's Tom Foreman is here to walk us through what we're hearing from federal officials, but also what the videos show, including the new videos, because what they are saying and what the videos are showing are not always the same thing, Tom.
Yeah, very much. I want to start with the very first statement made by the Trump administration in the aftermath of this shooting. It was a tweet by the Department of Homeland Security showing a firearm on what appears to be the seat of a car. And the tweet reads, an individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, seen here. You see the picture behind it there. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Now we have this new angle of the video that's just been cleared by CNN, and it shows the lead up to this deadly altercation. This is what I want you to take a look at. Of course, this is a disturbing video. Let's take some time though and watch this together. Some things to note. As it begins, you see Pretti out there in the middle of the street. He shows up right in this area here. You start seeing him, and he is at one point using his camera. There he is, right there, and he's pointing to traffic, sort of waving traffic through. At some moment here, you see that law enforcement approaches him, and he backs away as they start moving up on him. He is not trying to move toward them. He's backing away. Then you're going to see one of these officers approach a woman near him and really forcefully shove her to the ground right there. And Pretti starts rushing over toward her. Now, they're both getting pepper sprayed at this point. He gets grabbed, and he's taken over to the ground here. I'll point out this is about 15 seconds from when officers turned to him. He's now on the ground. They are on top of him. The officers are all around. He does not appear to have a weapon in his hand. He doesn't brandish anything. He doesn't seem to do anything. And then all of a sudden you see one agent in the middle there. Look, he turns away, and that's when the shooting begins. One shot followed by, in our analysis, 9 other shots there. We heard from Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino. He was asked at what point Pretti brandished a weapon in all of this. This was his answer.
Allie, this situation again is evolving. This situation is under investigation. Those facts will come to light.
This is important because an important detail, because concealed carry is legal. We know from local officials Pretti had a permit to carry a weapon. And law enforcement analysts here on CNN have raised questions as to why the picture of this gun that DHS shared online was shown on the seat of a car and not in the scene where Pretti was shot. And we now have an answer. CNN analysis shows, if you watch all those videos carefully, you see a federal agent right there who appears to be removing a gun. This is very critical to remember. That piece of video you're seeing right there is happening about a second or maybe slightly less than a second before the shooting begins. Now, it is just video. We have to look at it. There'll be a lot of questions here, but that's the reason people say you have to have a truly impartial and fair investigation here, because if he removed the gun before all this shooting broke out, then why is this man now dead? It's really quite a remarkable series of events all coming together here, but almost all of them, Aaron,
in a chaotic system, when things happen very quickly and judgments are in fight or flight mode, things can happen. You can't just sit here and just look at this logically. The reality of the situation is the nurse shouldn't have been there. The nurse shouldn't have been impeding on ICE's operations. And he should have known better that this thing could get out of control and something really bad could happen, which it did. This is one of those chaotic things that can happen, and death can take place. You don't know the ones that are around the nurse compared to the one that disarmed. You don't know if he's disarmed or not. You don't know that. The video makes it look like, well, he was disarmed. Yeah, but the people above him, do they know that? He obviously was resisting. You don't know what was said in that pile. He may have been threatening. He may not have been. But you also have to remember that the ICE agents have been constantly, day after day after day, been dealing with aggressive protesters. And their life is at risk. So they'll choose their life over the protester's life. Of course. Why not? The nurse should have had common sense and should not have been there.
The story that came out of the Trump administration early on.
He's there. This nurse and all those protesters are there to protect illegal aliens. Let's just call it for what it is. Why aren't they protesting on what's going on in Iran, where there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of people being killed? I think it's thousands, not tens of thousands, but thousands of people are being killed by the Ayatollah and the military apparatus. secular people wanting freedom are being killed in Iran, where are the protests in the United States? They'll protest about illegal aliens that are literally stealing your taxpayer money. They'll protest about Israel going into Gaza. Why aren't they protesting against Iran and the Ayatollah? You ever wonder about that? Why? It doesn't fit the woke narrative. Because it's all about the oppressor and the oppressed. And the Ayatollah is it falls in the category of the oppressed according to them. What about during COVID? Where were the protests about stopping biological development in terms of weapon development? Where was the protest there? I covered it. Thousands of videos about it. And guess what? No one protested. No one protested to stop the illegal activity of making biological weapons. They didn't shut down the labs. They didn't do anything. Rand Paul talks, and doesn't do anything because he's part of the problem. Where were the protests? Where were the protests when the women couldn't feed their infants because there were a lack of infant milk? There were no protests. None. Zero. But there's tons of protests to fight ICE because Trump's in office to protect illegal aliens. So let me get this straight. You have the protests that are willing to support the illegal aliens, but they didn't want to stop the weapons development. There wasn't enough. There were some protests, but not enough galvanized across the nation, coordinated to stop forced inoculations. There's no protesting going on with the killing that's happening in Iran. But there were lots of protesting for illegal aliens and to demonize the Jews. This is society. And like I said, on September 11th of 2026, there is a curse that's coming down because of this kind of bullshit. Not because ICE killed the individual, because he deserved it. But because our society is focusing on the wrong crap.
And let's go now to our senior law enforcement analyst, Andrew McCabe, also the former deputy director of the FBI. So Director McCabe, what do you see in all of this so far from the information that we have, from the video you've watched, from the responses we've got from DHS?
If he's such an analyst in terms of intelligence, an intelligence analyst, I think he worked for the FBI, but either way. But the thing is he's an intelligence analyst. Why doesn't she ask the bigger question? Why are there no protests about the killings in Iran? And these protests aren't taking place in the United States. They're taking place other places. Why? Why is it that CNN supports this concept of the oppressed and the oppressor? I mean, why does Aaron even have a job at CNN? Why doesn't it just go to someone else? She's a white female. She's not. She's part of the oppressing category. She's an oppressor. She's not the oppressed. Why don't you have some other? Why don't you have, Bozo the Clown? Why don't you have some sort of triple minority? A white female isn't good enough.
Well, I mean, obviously, Aaron, at the core of it, you have an unbelievable tragedy where it appears that a potentially unarmed person was essentially assassinated by horrible law enforcement tactics that dramatically escalated the situation. But there are so many questions here at the absolute core of lethal force training in the FBI Academy, in the Academy at Glencoe, Georgia, where DHS agents, ICE agents, Border Patrol folks go through. You are taught from the very beginning that if you use your weapon, you have to be able to, after the fact, articulate exactly why you perceived an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. And so the question now is, when are we going to hear that articulation? What is the reason that these officers, or a single officer, we don't know how many people shot, believed they were in imminent threat of death by this person who was, by every video we've seen, on the ground with anywhere from 4 to 5 officers on top of him at the same time. Nowhere in these videos do you see a weapon in this man's hand. And so while Commander Bovino's statement was very artfully written, yes, they encountered someone who had a gun, it is not clear that that man ever presented the gun, brandished the gun, pointed the gun at anyone, threatened to harm any of these officers. So what's the excuse for having to use lethal force here? We have no idea.
No, and in fact, they were quick to, post a picture of the gun, which they removed from the crime scene. They put in a car. They said, look at these extra magazines. And there was some deplorable act that he was prepared to commit, but they've never actually even said that he did brandish it. And obviously there's no video evidence that he did any such thing. He did have a permit to carry it. He was clearly there. We hear all the whistles on that one video, right? The whistles people do when they're warning of ICE. He was there trying to protect, it appears, a woman that they pushed over. So, Dr. McCabe, I'm just curious, though, if there is no investigation, which at this point doesn't appear that there are going to be any indications they're saying case closed and sealed, right? And they don't give access to the state for an investigation, which, again, that would be surprising if they did. They didn't do it with Renee Nicole Good. Then what happens here?
Nothing. No. Nothing. Nothing happens here. Just like nothing happened after the killing of Renee Good. In fact, so what we have seen, Aaron, is now we have a very common set of circumstances. We know what the game plan is for the White House and DHS. Immediately after the event, they go to the media and they put out a version of events that paints the victim as a domestic terrorist. It's happened to Renee Good. They then said Renee Good's wife was also a domestic terrorist, which of course neither of them are. And now immediately they say the same thing about this man. And so that's absolutely contrary to any effort to stage a legitimate investigation. You would never have high-ranking officials from the agency involved going out to the public prejudging it, but that's what's happened in every one of these cases. In the Renee Good case, you actually had the Deputy Attorney General of the United States of America came out on social media, a day after the event, and said there will be no investigation, there was no wrongdoing, there's nothing to investigate here. Essentially offered him a pardon from any accountability for this. And I can tell you that the other officers on the ground in Minneapolis, in Maine, in Chicago, wherever they may be deployed, they hear this loud and clear. And the signal they get is, do whatever you want. There will be no accountability. You can be as violent as you want. You can provoke as many conflicts as you want, as we've seen happen in this case. And there will be no accountability. And people should be very, very concerned about that. Anytime there's a law enforcement shooting of any type, there should be a fair, unbiased investigation. That is not happening here.
Well, I mean, I think on the basis of it, too, you talk about the lack of training and professionalism that may have been on display here. When you're surrounded by that many people, right? I mean, when regular people get put into a scrum, you can understand all of the not knowing what's going on, right? But these aren't regular people. These are supposed to be trained law enforcement who know exactly what they're doing in situations like this, right? But that's not what we saw. So,
Not at all.
Yeah. So then, I mean, is it possible then that we would, Look, in the case of Renee Nicole Good, we know the name of the individual who shot her. We know they chose not to do an investigation to find out exactly what happened, right? But we know. But in this case, we may never actually even know because it's unclear in that scrum who shot or how many people shot. The only thing we know for sure is that Alex Pretti, who was killed, was not one of the people who shot.
That's absolutely right. And there's no indication that we'll ever get to the bottom of this. Because, as I've said, the administration has proven in all prior events that they are perfectly comfortable going out and deliberately misleading the public as to what's happening on the ground in Minneapolis. Convicting people for domestic terrorism before they've ever been presented a single piece of evidence. How about the photograph of Nakima Anderson, who the White House admitted they intentionally altered the photograph to make her look worse at the moment of her arrest. It's unbelievable. We've never seen this from any other administration that I'm familiar with at any other time in our history. Never seen this level of violent conduct by law enforcement against the citizenry be completely ignored and swept under the rug by the administration.
The bottom line is this: the protesters are supporting illegal aliens. The illegal aliens have broken the law. They need to get out. Most of the people in the United States accepts the policy, wants the policy of removing illegal aliens out of the country. They shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be using our taxpayer money. I don't care if they've been here for 30 years. I don't care if they've been paying taxes. If they're here illegally, get out. It's that simple. We shouldn't have a citizenry that's fighting law enforcement, preventing them from removing these illegal aliens. And the ones that they're removing are violent illegal aliens. That's the problem. That's even worse. But even if they're not, they're here illegally. They broke the law. Oh, they want asylum. Go through the normal process for asylum. No. So you got to push back, because if you don't push back, then what it is it's mob rule. And it's the warnings that Plato stated long time ago. You cannot accept mob rule. Mob rule will destroy your country. A pure democracy will destroy your country. That was the lesson learned from Plato. So it doesn't matter what the citizenry wants. It matters what the Constitution, your constitutional republic, states. Because it's about property rights, and you can extend this out. Since our Constitution was based on the Enlightenment and John Locke, the pursuit of life, liberty, and property, and happiness. All right, that's the bedrock of our constitutional republic. Well, if you have illegal aliens here and taking your taxpayer dollars, they're taking away your property. You don't have recourse then. What's your recourse? How do you get your money back? They stole. This is why Plato warned the masses are stupid. Right here, got the masses that are stupid, that are literally protecting illegal aliens and allowing for my taxpayer dollars, your taxpayer dollars to be stolen. All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the clarity factor. Why do you need the clarity factor? So you can see through the bullshit from CNN. All right? Clarity factor. Gets rid of that brain fog, allows you to concentrate, improves your memory. Take it with filtered water, drink it with filtered water. Take it every day, and you're going to improve your neuroplasticity. You're going to improve those dendritic connections. You're going to be able to think faster, and you're going to have better memory. You're going to be able to concentrate better. It's a very powerful neurostack you should be taking every day. And having good cognition is going to help to slow down the aging process, because one of the aging effects is declining brain function. Well, if you actually can improve your brain function, you're slowing down that. All right? Get the magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc will boost up your immune system. We're in the cold season, if you haven't noticed. Most of America is under snow. Get magnesium and zinc, boost up that immune system. Magnesium and zinc will also help with brain function. So you don't think like Aaron on CNN. And magnesium and zinc, this supplement will help to increase the efficacy of vitamin D3. Why? Because magnesium is super important to improve the efficacy of vitamin D3. Now, I have a new product on my store. If you have pulled muscles, achy joints, headaches, or bruises, apply super strong relief to the area that's bothering you on your skin. This is topical. And it will relieve the pain within 30 seconds or 60 seconds. If you have that joint pain, put it on the joint. If you have a headache, put it around your temples, around your forehead, around your neck muscles. It'll relieve the headache. If you have a bruise, put it on the bruise. If you have a sore muscle, put it on the sore muscle. This will relieve the pain. It's high quality. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the super strong relief. And since we were talking about vitamin D3, we're in the winter season. You need to take it. Vitamin D3 is a cofactor for gene expression. So it's super important to take every day, but especially in the winter season. Why? Because vitamin D3 will help to get rid of cells that are infected. It will help to get cells to go into apoptosis. Vitamin D3 also helps with bone density. It helps you to absorb calcium. And when you're doing resistance training, it'll allow you to build denser bone. Vitamin D3 also helps with, guess what? Cardiovascular health. Vitamin D3 is really important to take every day, but especially during the winter season. And there's going to be an awful lot of people, because of the cold weather and they're outside and they have a runny nose, eventually they're going to get sick. So you better pay attention. There's going to be an awful lot of people getting sick because of the weather that we just are going through. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and be prepared. A great way to boost up your immune system and neutralize. Get the Cleanse Max 35 or Max 14. Max 14 is 14 parts per million. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. They're all at different price points based on your affordability. But guess what? Take a teaspoon a day every day. Swish in your mouth, gargle 20 seconds or so, and then swallow it. This will help with the health of your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help with the health of your epithelial lining. What does that all mean? It means that your immune system is boosted up. And it will help to neutralize. That's super important for oral hygiene. So that will help you get through the winter season, especially when people are getting sick. And guess what? When you're neutralizing and improving your oral cavity, you're improving your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. So please go to my store, get the Cleanse Max 35 or Max 14. Take a teaspoon a day every day. If you're not feeling well, or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day. Swish in your mouth, gargle 20 seconds or so, and then swallow it. It's very simple. Don't be a stupid liberal, because liberals are stupid, and they become more stupid. And when there's more liberals out there, the whole world will fall in Dante's Inferno.
Very title, but these are scary times. Yeah. Outline for us, if you will, how this world war, and of course some people are saying that we're already in the foothills of it, how this world war might transpire.
Okay, so I think, firstly, that phrase used by the head of MI6, we're neither at peace or war, is probably the best way of thinking about it at the moment. Peace would be a lot easier than this, and war would be a lot worse. So, if we were in a proper major European or global war, you're probably talking about London being struck periodically in the way that Kyiv is being struck, so conventional ballistic missiles, probably the centre of Paris, probably the centre of lots of other places in Europe. Most likely place to start is actually probably the other side of the world, the Pacific. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan is, I still think, probably the most likely single cause of a major global conflict.
But that would only, sorry to interrupt you, Peter, but that would only be a major global war if the Americans intervened on behalf of Taiwan, wouldn't it?
Yes, I mean, firstly, it would only be it might escalate pretty quickly if the Japanese intervene separately to the Americans and drag the Americans in. There are a variety of ways in which a Taiwan conflict could escalate. It's not inevitable, you're right.
But would the Americans be dragged in? They might just say, guys, it's Asia, right? This is China's back.
Let's cover 10 pro tips for working with the Cursor agent. So I've got Cursor open and my agent on the right. And the first tip is to use plan mode. So
guys, it's Asia, right? This is China's backyard. You're on your own.
Well, so they've deliberately kept to what they call strategic ambiguity over this for the past 30, 40 years. What they do have is very sophisticated war plans to intervene immediately, including using undersea drones, missiles, long-range strike to get in the way of a Chinese invasion force. Biden said that he would definitely do that if the Chinese invaded. He was asked that about 3 or 4 times during his presidency, and Donald Trump has said he will never give a strong answer one way or the other. Nevertheless, it is still... one of the reasons why the Chinese aren't invading Taiwan today is that they believe there's a possibility the Americans might intervene if they did so. If that happened, I think it is incredibly likely that Russia would simultaneously go onto the offensive to grab the bits of NATO territory it wants in Eastern Europe, because America will be divided. So to quote a former Danish head of the Danish Navy, if the Americans and Chinese fight, we will fight each other. There are also a bunch of ways in which war could break out in Europe. Maybe a coalition of willing force in Ukraine after a ceasefire gets attacked, or more likely Russia comes into one of the NATO member Baltic states or Finland to try and grab it.
How likely do you think that scenario is? Because that's the one I'm hearing all the time.
So I think
Lithuania or whatever.
Overall in the book, I put a 30% chance of global war in the next 10 years. I still think it's probably about the same for Eastern Europe, and I still think, despite all of the other issues, the most likely single... if I was sitting in Estonia, the most likely single trigger would be that China's gone loud in Asia and the Russians come in. But it's not impossible the Russians come out their own operation. And the Poles and the Germans have said publicly that they believe that Russia could mount a very...
I've been telling people, September 11th, 2026, the gate of hell is going to open up, and it doesn't close until the first or second week of October of 2027. Why? Because Rosh Hashanah coincides with the Sabbath, and you can't blow the shofar. The shofar has to be blown to silence Satan. Silencing Satan is super important because that allows for a blessing to come in. Because he can't be silenced, guess what? The whole fucking world is going to have a curse. There is a very high probability of a major fucking event happening within this time frame. Very high, about 80%. Now, if you don't believe me, look at what happened on October 7th. October 7th happened because Rosh Hashanah and the Sabbath coincided in September. And the actual attack was on Simchas Torah, which is kind of this tail end of this arc of holidays, because you have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot, and then Simchas Torah. That's the ending of this cycle of holidays. I'm telling you, trust me. You can see this geopolitically playing out. We've already spread our troops thin. You can see easily, if you were President Xi, would you take Taiwan now? When we move the aircraft carrier, the Lincoln, and the strike group towards Iran? Now you have to remember, most of the oil that's coming to China is going to be chokeholded because of this conflict with Iran. China may have to. Now, the only other means of moving goods and material is through the Northern Passage. And that's only opened up July through October for China, where they move around Russia and then to Northern Europe. So there's a window of opportunity here for President Xi, and it's closing. Now, if you're President Xi, what would you do? What would you do? Would you think about striking Taiwan, especially if oil is choked from Iran to China? It's already choked from Venezuela. What are you going to do? There's extremely high probability of major military operations within this time frame of September 11th, 2026 to October of 2027. Then it may not be just military operations. It may be actually a financial crash. Now, you sit and think about this. Do you deserve, honestly, the society we live in, the world at large, you individually, your family, whatever, do you deserve prosperity? The answer for most people is no.
Into NATO territory, so they grab a city like Narva, even while it's fighting in Ukraine.
Okay. General Dominique Trinquant, you've been listening very carefully and nodding occasionally to what Peter had to say. Do you think that these are realistic scenarios?
I always think that the worst is not in the future. Russia, the ability of Russia to fight against NATO or European is very limited. For 4 years, they have been fighting Ukraine without winning. And so they are increasing. I think that war is a necessity for Mr. Putin to maintain his power in Russia.
That's true.
He doesn't want peace. So that means that he wants a war, but he's not able to really fight war against NATO or European. So it will continue in Ukraine.
Right. Right. So did it make more sense to knock out Putin? Or have more sanctions to force him at the table to make peace with Zelensky? Trump just kind of like dropped the ball on that one. It was more important to get the peace agreement settled before September 11th, 2026, because shit's going to hit the fan. Same thing with Iran. Was it better to knock out the Ayatollah last year? Yeah. Now we have to make sure we do it before September 11th, 2026, or it's going to be a problem. Was it more important to push on Xi and to move defense forces and strengthen Taiwan before September 11th, 2026? Yeah. He's not. And it's going to be a problem. Our hegemonic power is predicated on the first island chains. We are going to lose freedom of navigation through the first island chains if China takes Taiwan. Then what are you going to do? We can't use the Northern Passage over Canada because of the ice. We don't have enough icebreakers on top of it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Your life is predicated on the hegemonic power of the United States since World War II in the Pacific. That is the game.
Doing, and on the hybrid, using hybrid tool, he will fight against Europe, but not with the kinetic tools.
Peter, isn't that a fair point that if Russia has barely moved the front line in Donbass in 4 years of fighting, and in fact, since the beginning of the war, it's had to roll back in the areas around Kharkiv and so on, and hasn't really recaptured that. How could they possibly take on Poland, let alone the Baltic republics?
So I think firstly they would really, really struggle with Poland. So I think that's a good point. The issue comes if fighting stops in Ukraine and the Russians decide that they would do better in the Baltic states than against a Ukraine that is heavily militarized and ready. So the danger comes if the soft bit of the front line, and I think you're right, it's incredibly unlikely that that's going to be Poland because the Poles aren't really put a lot of effort into militarizing that front line. The issue becomes the Germans are also reinforcing Lithuania pretty aggressively, the Canadians are reinforcing Latvia. The risk is, and the risk is particularly around Estonia, which is where the British and the French are, battle groups, the smallest of the three NATO forward battle groups, and it's the greatest Russian threat. If Estonia looks like the easy bit of the front line, particularly if you get a far-right government in France, the French pull out of NATO's command structures, so they said they might do. If we make Estonia the easy bit, then that may be where they come, particularly if they've got the top cover of the Americans being distracted by China, either by a hot war or by something that's on the edge of war in Asia. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've not heard that scenario before, but it's logical in itself. What about you, General? Do you agree with what Peter just had to say? Is that a realistic scenario?
No, I think the Baltics say are parts of NATO. We have troops there. You clearly said that the French and the British, the British battle group with French troops inside are in Estonia, meaning that if the Russians are attacking there, they are attacking French and British troops, which is the major change. I just remind you that we are nuclear power. We've got deterrence, and I believe in deterrence. And I think that Mr. Putin believes in deterrence. That's why he doesn't want to fight against British or French.
Right, but does he? Go on.
Yeah, but a really important point here. The reason that Estonia felt safe this Christmas, more than that Anglo-French force, important though it is, and one of the reasons the Estonians don't worry about a tactical nuke going into their main military base is got British or French troops there, so it is important, I'm not underplaying that, is that there were also 14 American tanks in Estonia over Christmas. Now, that's a much smaller force, but it's a much higher deterrent value because the Americans know if they kill those Americans, they'll be fighting the Americans in Europe, and the big NATO war plan created by Supreme Allied Command of Europe and particularly US Army Europe, a general called Chris Donahue, involves using American forces, and that's where the deterrent value comes.
Okay.
If those American forces aren't there, then yes, I absolutely agree with the French that Britain and France and Germany can do stuff, but that deterrent value drops off very dramatically if the US decides not to follow through on those plans.
Final question, brief one to both of you. Let me start with you, General Plancon. If the Baltic republics were to be, invaded or attacked by Russia in any shape or form, this should trigger Article 5 of the NATO treaty. Do you think the Americans, under Donald Trump, will honor Article 5 if the Baltic republics are attacked? Yes or no?
Yes.
No. And I think that's why the deterrence is coming. Yeah, I say that the deterrence is coming from the UK and the French and not from the US.
And is that enough deterrence to put the Russians off?
Yes, of course. And I'm talking about nuclear deterrence, clearly.
Okay, Peter, what's your response? Will the Americans come in to defend the Baltics, and is that deterrence enough?
The French and British are important, and the French tactical nuclear deterrence is particularly important there. We only have Trident missiles, big submarine missiles, take out a city. The French have those. They also have a smaller nuclear missile they can fire long range. That's really important. However, I think if the Americans would have I actually think Donald Trump probably would fight for the Baltics. I'm much less convinced by J.D. Vance. And I do not currently think that the British and French are doing enough to deter a limited attack against Estonia with what they're doing now. I think if the Americans were definitely pulling back, we would need to step up, and we would need to step up quite quickly.
Okay, you've already said 30% chance of a world war in the next 10 years. General, what is your view? How many percentages do you give the possibility of a world war in the next 10 years? What a cheerful question, eh?
Less than that. I would say 20% just to show that I'm more optimistic.
But you're not convincing me. Peter?
Last point. I would say that the point of both of those numbers is it probably won't happen, and if we do the right things, we can stop it. The issue is if we don't do the right things, that number will go up. And once it starts getting north of 40, 50%, that's when you really, really need to start worrying.
I'm telling you, a curse is coming. A curse is coming because we were given a chance during October 7th of 2023, I think it was, to get our house in order, to get the world in order, to have a potential blessing. We didn't do it. We all failed, and we're all going to get cursed. It's the way it is. All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin. This multivitamin has the enzymatic activity cofactors that you need. This is easy to digest. The multivitamins in here will change the conformation of the enzyme to perform better. So you'll have better cellular metabolism. When you have better cellular metabolism, your organ systems perform better, and therefore you're slowing down the aging process. Digestive enzyme complex. It's not the probiotic called Digest, which is a VeggieCat version, and the probiotic, which is the powdered version. So you can get the powdered version probiotic or the VeggieCap version, the probiotic. But take them together, all right? Not take them together. Take this winter season is just discombobulated to me. All right, let me restart. Get the probiotics, all right? You can get it in VeggieCap version or in the powdered version. And you should take them with the multivitamin, just stack it. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, with that, with a good probiotic, either the powdered version or the VeggieCap version, all right, what that will do is help with your gut biome, allow you to absorb your nutrients, bring down inflammation, which is super important to slow down aging, boost up your immune system at the gut level, increase your concentrations of IgA. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll have better memory. You'll be able to clear your central nervous system, detoxify it. And when you do that regularly, you're actually improving your neural connections. So you're going to be thinking better. A lot of people don't realize that proper sleep is actually going to help with your brain function. Your skin will improve, even your hair and your nails. So it's really important to take a probiotic, right? But stack it with the multivitamin. And that's the foundation to slow down the aging process. That's what I wanted to say. All right, with that, let's go to CNN. Bash, who's a super Jewish liberal, is questioning the Border Patrol about the shooting of Pretti. All right, let's listen.
Here with me now is U.S. Border Patrol Commander at Large, Greg Bobino. Thank you for being here. Sir, you are still in Minneapolis, and I want to get to a lot of questions that we have that are unanswered. First and foremost is that Alex Pretti approached Border Patrol agents with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. I want to go back to one of the videos, and I know you can see it there, and I want to ask you about what you're seeing, because multiple angles of this incident show him holding up a cell phone and recording it, not a gun. Did he at any point pull out his weapon?
Dana, good morning, and thanks for having me. The weapon, and we do know that the suspect did bring a weapon, a loaded 9mm high-capacity handgun, to a riot. We do know that. As far as what happened in that intervening moment with the video that you just showed, that's going to come to light through the investigation. That's being investigated, and those facts and those questions will be answered soon enough.
Okay, but the Homeland Security Secretary is not waiting for that investigation to take place before saying that Alex Pretti was, quote, brandishing a weapon. Let's go to video 7, because, of course, you know this far better than I. The definition of brandishing is giving or flourishing something, especially a weapon, as a threat or in anger and excitement. That's just a still photo of what Alex Pretti appears to be holding. There is nothing that we have seen that showed him, as Secretary Noem said, brandishing a weapon. Have you, sir, seen something different to support what the Secretary said?
Dan, I think what we need to take a look at here is the situation in its totality. What happened leading up to this situation? The suspect decided to inject himself into a law enforcement action. What's not being said here is the fact that Border Patrol agents and law enforcement were conducting a targeted law enforcement effort against a violent, illegal alien that was nearby, and that suspect injected himself into that law enforcement situation with a weapon. And what happened between when that situation first came about and the shooting, that's going to be investigated, and we're going to get to the up to the facts of that.
Well, you said yesterday that this looks like a situation where the individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. What evidence do you have that he wanted to massacre law enforcement? Because all the videos that we have, and I do want to, we just have the still shot up now, but I do, control room, want to play one of the other videos. Let's play video number 1 again. It doesn't look anything like he's trying to massacre law enforcement. In fact, he was filming, and then it looked like he was trying to help another individual there who was pushed down by law enforcement, and then they went after him.
In fact, I believe that the fantastic training that our law enforcement partners have, the fact that they're highly trained, prevented any specific shootings of law enforcement. So good job for our law enforcement in taking him down before he was able to do that. And again, Dana, let's look at why he was there in the first place. Was he simply walking by and just happened to walk into a law enforcement situation and try to direct traffic and stand in the middle of the road and then assault, delay, and obstruct law enforcement? Or was he there for a reason? Did he fall victim to that violent and heated rhetoric by a Mayor Fry, a Governor Walz? Look, Dana, they're trying to portray Border Patrol agents and ICE agents as Gestapo, Nazi, and many other words. Did this individual fall victim, as many others have,
Okay,
to that type of heated rhetoric?
I want to stay focused on this incident right now, because what you were saying is that he went there to try to stop this law enforcement operation. All of the video that we have seen shows him documenting it with his cell phone, which is a lawful thing to do. And the only time he seemed to interact with law enforcement is when they went after him when he was trying to help an individual who law enforcement pushed down. So where do you have the evidence to show that he was trying to impede that law enforcement operation?
He was interfering
Dana,
with.
first, he was there in the scene. He was in the scene actively impeding and assaulting law enforcement to the point.
But that's not illegal. He wasn't impeding it. He was filming it, which is a legal thing to do in the United States of America.
Dana, let's don't freeze frame adjudicate this now. He was there for a reason, and that reason was to impede law enforcement to the point.
What evidence do you have of that?
And here's a good point, Dana, is the fact that de-escalation techniques were utilized during this action. Those de-escalation techniques, whether it was physically trying to remove them from that law enforcement scene, that active law enforcement scene in which law enforcement were going after a violent illegal alien, or the use of pepper spray, which is another de-escalation technique. Those techniques did not work. Officers always try to use the minimum amount of force necessary to either effect an arrest, which in this case was more than likely 18 U.S.C. 111, assault on a federal officer, or
Where did he assault the federal officer in any of the video that you've seen? Because it looked to us from every angle, sir, that he was approached by them when he was helping another individual who was pushed down. What evidence do you have that he was assaulting any law enforcement?
Dana, we don't need a suspect's help in an active law enforcement scene.
When you say suspect, what is
we
he
didn't ask
suspected
his
of?
help. That's an active law enforcement scene. He knew that was an active law enforcement scene, especially when the officers approached him, and it's very evident he did not need to be where he was.
So
and he
when
decided
somebody
on his own to stay there.
When somebody is pushed down and a person's instinct is to help that person, when somebody's pushed down by law enforcement, you're saying that you just stand back and let
Yes, that is the answer.
I mean, is that
Yes.
human nature?
Yes.
You know, Dana,
He wasn't supposed to
every
be there.
situation is different. What our officers are faced with here in Minneapolis are chaotic, very difficult and violent situations in which individuals, and this suspect is not the only one to bring a loaded weapon to a riot. The situations are chaotic and ever changing. Follow directions for law enforcement. Don't inject yourself knowingly beforehand into a law enforcement situation.
With respect, it feels as though in some ways you're blaming the victim here.
The victims are the Border Patrol agents. I'm not blaming the Border Patrol agents. The victim are the Border Patrol agents. The suspect put himself in that situation. The victims are the Border Patrol agents there.
I want to go back to the gun. sir, because I think this is really, really critical. You can see an agent, and I just want to go to, let's see here, video 5. You can see a screenshot of an agent in a green jacket approach Pretti, and then he appeared to take a gun away. When the agent took the gun away, which seems as though it was Pretti's gun, that happened before Pretti was shot. Why was an unarmed man shot multiple times by law enforcement, by your Border Patrol agents?
Dana, you don't know he was unarmed. I don't know he was unarmed. That's freeze frame adjudication of a crime scene via a photo. That's why we have investigators. That's why we have an investigation that is going to answer those questions. How many shots were fired? Who fired shots? Where was the guns? Where were the guns located? All those questions are going to be answered.
I think you can see the screen.
In the investigation. We're not going to adjudicate that here on TV in one freeze frame there.
Okay, it's not a freeze frame. We're showing a video of one of your agents taking the gun away, and that happened before Pretti was shot.
We don't know that agent was taking any gun away. That could have been the agent's gun. We don't know that. The facts are going to come to light.
So you're disputing the video, that's what happened.
With an investigation. That's why we investigate.
Well, with respect, you say that's why we investigate, but you're also drawing other conclusions that sort of fly in the face of waiting for an investigation. I just want to also go back to what I was asking about with regard to what Secretary Noem said, that he was brandishing a gun. At any point, do you have any evidence that, yes, he had a gun on his person? Was he brandishing it? Was he a threat because he had a gun in his hand that put law enforcement in danger?
Damien, we heard. We heard the law enforcement officer say gun, gun, gun. So at some point they knew there was a gun. So again, that is going to be part of that investigation as to what was happening on the ground there between those victims, the Border Patrol agent victims, and the suspect.
Both the police chief in Minneapolis, O'Hara, and Governor Walz say Pretti was legally licensed to carry a concealed weapon. So are you saying it's not okay for him to exercise his Second Amendment right, not to mention his First Amendment right to be there in the first place, but his Second Amendment right to carry a gun? And if you do, you can be shot by federal law enforcement?
No, I didn't say that, Dana. I never said that. What I'm saying is we respect that Second Amendment right, but those rights don't count when you riot and assault, delay, obstruct, and impede law enforcement officers, and most especially when you mean to do that beforehand.
How do you know that?
When you mean to do that beforehand, when you show up to an active crime scene, don't leave the crime scene and you're armed, then you've got the decision-making process for that individual doesn't seem to be very good. Now, back to the Second Amendment, what you're saying about the Second Amendment is peacefully protesting with firearms. Absolutely, I've done that myself and fully support that, but not when you perpetrate violence, obstruct, delay, or obfuscate Border Patrol in the performance of their duties in an
There's no evidence that he was perpetrating violence. And there's no evidence, unless you have it, and we'd love to see it if there is, that he was intending to massacre law enforcement, other than the fact that he was there and he had a gun lawfully.
He meant to be there beforehand. Again, Dana, he came there beforehand.
How do you know that?
Reason.
How do you know that?
Because he was there.
But all he was doing was filming and documenting it, which is legal. He was carrying a gun, which in Minneapolis
I didn't say it wasn't. And I didn't say it wasn't legal.
So then what did he do that was illegal?
Federal law enforcement when he does that. That's an active law enforcement crime
Where do you
scene
see in the video that he was
decided to enter into?
Where do you see in the video that he was assaulting law enforcement? Because from everything we have seen, law enforcement was assaulting him when he was there trying to help another individual.
Dana, law enforcement doesn't assault anyone. Follow directions of law enforcement. followed directions of law enforcement in an active crime scene. It's very evident he didn't want to do that. Very evident that the other individuals didn't want to do that. And, it's too bad the consequences had to be paid because he injected himself into that crime scene. I can't say that enough. He made the decision to go there. We didn't make the decision to talk to him. We didn't even know that individual was in existence until he came into that crime scene.
I want to go back to video number 1 because you keep saying that he injected himself into the crime scene. He was a guy on a street filming an operation. He was far away. He wasn't on the crime scene. And what I want you to see again is that law enforcement appears by the video we have to be approaching him and the person who's next to him, not the other way around. And so what I want to know is what evidence do you have that he went after law enforcement?
Sure. The fact that he was standing in the middle of the road, there was interaction between him, the bystanders, and law enforcement, and again, follow directions of law enforcement. He doesn't need to be in the middle of a crime scene. Dan, I don't think you would want to be in the middle of a crime scene, or you would want civilians in the middle of a crime scene injecting themselves into something that is none of their business at all.
Can you also just answer the question about the gun? Because again, do you have any evidence that he was brandishing his weapon? Did he ever have his hand on the weapon?
Yeah, again, the officers on the ground, in that meeting, we hear gun, gun, gun. So that gun at some point became visible to officers.
But could it have been because they had him on the ground and maybe his shirt came up and they saw that it was on him? That doesn't mean that he was.
And that is why we have an investigation.
Fine.
That is what we are investigating. You're not going to know that now, and I'm not going to know.
I think an investigation is great, but the Homeland Security Secretary said he was brandishing a weapon. Do you have evidence that we haven't seen that he was brandishing a weapon?
He brought a semi-automatic weapon to a riot, assaulted federal officers, and at some point they saw that weapon. So I do believe the secretary is 100% spot on in what she said.
Seeing the
Would
weapon.
you bring a weapon and assault a federal officer if you did not have intent to harm or delay or obstruct that federal officer with a weapon?
You keep saying that he assaulted a federal officer, but again, we have not seen evidence that happened. It looked like he was on the defense, and again, he had a gun legally. It sort of feels like we're in the upside down, where we have law enforcement and conservatives who are very pro Second Amendment saying the problem was that he had a gun legally.
No, the problem is, as I said several times now, is he injected himself. He put himself where he did not need to be. He put himself in and put law enforcement officers in jeopardy through his actions. These were his actions, not law enforcement officers' action. We had to react to an individual that came there for a specific reason. And again, what that reason is, we're going to find more out about that in the coming days. I'll be interested to see what his reason for being there while Border Patrol agents were arresting a violent criminal, illegal alien doing their lawful, ethical, and moral duties in Minneapolis. That's the question.
Well, but the question is also, why is an American citizen now dead for the second time who was there to document, in this case, and clearly to be there as a bystander, which is his First Amendment right.
He wasn't there to clearly document it. You don't socially engineer the topic, Dana. He was not there to document.
Appeared to be. That's fair. Appeared to be.
He obfuscated and delayed officers there on the scene. That's pretty evident to me.
I want to ask you about your agents. You said that this was a highly trained agent who had been serving on Border Patrol for 8 years. What was he trained for? Because these are your Border Patrol agents, and they're now in the interior of the country, in American cities. Was he trained in urban policing?
Yes, all of our Border Patrol agents are trained in all for all types of environments, including urban policing. This particular Border Patrol agent had 8 years with some specific skill sets there with both firearms and less lethal munitions. Also, let's take a look at the training and the environments that Border Patrol agents operate in. We operate in places like San Diego, California, Tucson, Arizona, New Orleans. All those have Border Patrol sectors. Detroit, Michigan. We've got Border Patrol sectors in Buffalo. So this myth, and I saw this just last night on CNN, this myth that Border Patrol agents don't work in urban areas is just that. It's a myth. We're well adept at urban areas, conducting that Title VIII immigration enforcement wherever we go. It doesn't matter if it's a desert or an urban environment. We're very well adept at doing that.
Is the agent or agents, is it your understanding that more than one agent fired a weapon at Alex Pretti?
Again, that's going to be part of the investigation. I'm not going to speculate on how many shots or who shot or that type of thing because I don't know.
Are the agents who were involved still on the job?
Yes, these Border Patrol agents are going to more than likely be on administrative duty, but they were main Border Patrol agents.
What does that mean? So they'll be off the streets for a bit?
Not in Minneapolis, they will, but only in Minneapolis here. They'll be at a different location.
Okay. And before I let you go, I just want to button up one point that you were making about what Alex Pretti was doing there. Do you accept that it is the law that an individual has a right to film what law enforcement is doing?
I believe that all citizens of the United States have those First and Fourth Amendment rights as long as they do so peacefully and don't delay, obstruct, or assault anyone in doing that. And that's the issue here because he was not peacefully doing anything.
All right. And just for the record, and we've seen this video multiple times from multiple angles, there was no evidence that he was doing anything other than being peaceful until the altercation began. Again, I look forward to seeing the other evidence in the investigation that you have, because we do want to get to the bottom of this and do want to get all of the facts as they actually happen. Chief Bovino, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here and answering questions.
Thank you, Dana.
Our bookstore is like a portal.
It's the other Friday at the Dean Hog.
And we want it,
Alrighty, let's listen into Trump weighs decisive military action against Iran amid massive naval deployment.
After pulling back from strikes on Iran last week, US President Donald Trump is still pressing for what he terms decisive military action. But Iran appears to have tightened its control of the country and targeted protesters through a brutal crackdown that has killed thousands. The discussions are happening while America sent an aircraft carrier and multiple fighter jets to the Middle East. Those deployments may be the start of a broader military buildup that would give Trump enough firepower to strike Iran. Trump has repeatedly used the word decisive when describing what effect he would like any American action to have on Iran. That phrasing, the use of the word decisive, has spurred Trump's aides, both at the Pentagon and at the White House, to refine an array of options for the president. Some of these options include pushing the regime out of power, perhaps handing over power to a number 2 or number 3 figure within the Ayatollah regime. Officials are also devising more modest options, which could include targeting the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. Trump is yet to order any sort of strikes on Iran, and what he will ultimately decide is still unclear. But he did throw a curveball during Davos at the inauguration of the Board of Peace, saying that Iran has reached out to him. Iran wanted to talk, but at the same time, he's also said that America is moving one of the largest armadas just off the coast of Iran.
You know, we have a lot of ships going that direction, just in case. We have a big flotilla going in that direction. And we'll see what happens. We have a big force going toward Iran. I'd rather not see anything happen, but we're watching them very closely. But we have an armada. We have a massive fleet heading in that direction, and maybe we won't have to use it. We'll see.
Death toll estimates vary, but officials say the number is likely far higher than what Iran officially admits, which is at 5,000 deaths. Mike Waltz, who is the US ambassador to the United Nations last week, said the UN's assessment is that Iranian authorities have killed up to 18,000 people. The larger question before Trump and his team is whether a foreign regime like Iran's can be dislodged just through American air power. The White House must also grapple with whether the administration is prepared to carry out a sustained military campaign that might last for weeks or months should the protesters once again take to the streets. And if they do, they could also appeal to Trump once again for protection. And Trump could egg them on, asking them to take over their institutions just like he's done before. There are things that military strikes can and cannot do during a human rights crackdown. If you really are signing up to change the regime, that's going to require significant air as well as ground operations. As the Trump administration discusses what next steps to take in Iran, the US military has rushed more assets to the Middle East. US F-15E jet fighters have landed this week in Jordan. The aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and its strike group, which includes destroyers, F-35s and other jet fighters, and electronic jamming aircraft, was spotted by maritime traffic trackers sailing westwards from the South China Sea towards the Persian Gulf. Additional air defenses will also be brought to the region, including more Patriot and THAAD anti-missile systems, which would be essential for fending off any Iranian counterattack. The arrival of more military hardware in the Middle East will present America with more strike options. As the Iranian protests unfolded last week, Trump received multiple briefings on the complexities of a military campaign, including how American airstrikes will not guarantee the collapse of the regime. But Trump has said that the Iranian leadership must go, no questions about it. Some American officials have since raised questions internally about what is the political objective of these strikes on Iran. Trump is aware that any military action would come well after he promised the protesters that help is on its way. It is also unlikely to be as swift as the operation that ousted former Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Iran may well turn out to be not another Venezuela. Meanwhile, Trump has also got to contend with allies in the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has asked Trump to postpone any American military attack on Iran. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Egypt, all American allies in the region, partners of Washington, they've also been asking the Trump administration not to attack Iran. They've told the Americans that a U.S. attack.
Something big is going to be coming soon here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. This will help with your cardiovascular health, bring down inflammation, help with your lipid profile, and reduce overclotting, because it will help to reduce the stickiness of your red blood cells. This is super important to take every day for your cardiovascular health. And finally, olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract will help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and helps you to control your lipid profile. It's a dual purpose supplement. It's a great way to get healthy, and it stacks really well with omega-3. It's very important to maintain your cardiovascular health, but also keep down inflammation and boost up that immune system. When you're bringing down inflammation, when you're improving your cardiovascular health, when you're soaking up free radicals, these are major vectors to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, get the olive leaf extract and the omega-3. All right, what I want to do is play the economist here. The economists are usually super liberal. We'll see what happens, but they're making this the title here. Could this be the end of the West as we know it? Yeah, it must be always Trump's fault. We'll see what they have to say. They're literally socialists. They're literally socialists. They're socialists with high vocabulary.
Transatlantic Alliance and NATO. So feel free to speculate at this point. Adam, I want to start with you. How lasting is the damage that's been done this week?
It's so hard to judge. I think we've talked about some of the positive parts of this week, the Europeans getting a bit of spine and being able to react a bit quicker. But I think profoundly, it has done a great deal of damage. The willingness to trust the Americans, even post-Trump, has ratcheted down. If you can ratchet down, it's really reduced the trust that there was. And I don't think anyone would be rational in believing that America will always be there in a way that it was there before. So I think it has done profound damage to the transatlantic relationship.
Well, I just wanted to reinforce Adam's point, highlight a quote that I used from a former European ambassador to NATO, very level-headed person, and I can't quote them by name, but what we ended this briefing on was saying, I hope European allies are looking to seize NATO structures, headquarters, commands, communications, in the event that America goes down this path, until America rights itself. And that's a sign of the times, as is Friedrich Merz's comment just a day ago that said, we should at least try to save NATO. And the wording there tells you everything, I agree, about the sense of desperation well beyond what it was last Munich with J.D. Vance attacking Europe.
I do think, to put a sort of another silver lining on it, I think what we're seeing now is, once again, in the short term, this is a real hit to the transatlantic alliance, absolutely. But in the longer term, if this is a moment for Europe to have a kind of galvanizing moment, even stronger than last year, when in the aftermath of J.D. Vance in Munich, of course, that was one of the reasons that accelerated what was going on in Germany in terms of rearming. If this is another kind of kick up the butt moment for Europe to really accelerate, not just its rearmament, but it's working together, the way it procures its weapons, its economic reforms, all of that, then we may look back, in 10 years, 15 years from now and say, actually, that President Trump, he was the key to Europe really getting its act together. I hate to say that, but I think there is a real possibility that that could be the case.
I guess the other question is sort of how long Europe has for this. And to my mind, a lot of that depends on who comes next. Under President Rubio or President Newsom, does this begin to shift back? Does Europe have more time? How much difference does that all make?
I thought when you said who comes next, it's also on the European side. Who comes next here? Is it Prime Minister Farage?
Oh, well, that obviously has an effect, but just
on the American side. Well, my concern is that this continues post-Trump. That it's not just about Trump being in the White House. That if you have J.D. Vance, for example, he has even more than Trump pushed the derision of Europe, the attacks on.
But Rubio is different, isn't he?
Rubio is a different figure, and I think you can see his focus on the Western Hemisphere, for example. He's a more rational, strategic thinker, I believe, than the others. But I don't know whether Rubio has the chance of muscling aside Vance. I would right now think that Vance would have a better opportunity than Rubio.
But so we've always pointed out here, this isn't just a question of the benign feelings of the US president. If a war breaks out over Taiwan or somewhere else in Asia, the effect could be the same, which is US incapability to devote the same resources, because many of the things that it provides to Europe and we need, air defenses, intelligence, refueling, major naval assets, submarines, those are exactly what would be drawn away to a Pacific conflict. So even the most pro-European benign president on the planet, and we're not going to get that anymore in America, even they would be forced to dilute the US commitment to Europe in a situation where these other pressing demands pulled America away. So it would be a tragedy if we slowed down in Europe on the false assumption we have a bit of a respite.
Sally, how much is this a Trump effect and how much is this a US effect?
I think it's both. Trump exaggerates, exacerbates, accelerates, and makes it all the more painful. But I think I should agree with Shashank. This is a broader shift. The old world order is over. We have to stop pearl clutching about it. You and I hope none of us do, but lots of people in Europe do. They look back and they want to recreate, slow things down, slow the change down, recreate the old. It is over. It is time to start thinking about how to build the new. And I think that's where the big focus needs to be for Europe. So I'm less concerned about thinking, is it going to be President Rubio? Is it going to be Vance? It's more, is Europe going to move fast enough to be prepared for this new world?
Yep. It's about time. Why should the American taxpayers constantly subsidize the Europeans? European nations have lots of social programs. They have free health care. They have free education or subsidized education. Germany, it's easy to get, a Ph.D. because it's paid for. Well, guess what? The American taxpayers had to subsidize their social programs because we were the ones that were footing the bill for NATO. Now, at the very beginning, when, they were trying to rebuild their nations back from World War II, and we were fighting the Cold War, it was really important that the United States financed it. All right? But that should have stopped when the Berlin Wall fell. Unfortunately, we had presidents, we had talking heads, we had think tanks that kept on pushing the same agenda. And it just got the United States citizen in more debt. $38 trillion. How many of those trillions of dollars are part of subsidizing Europe? You ever thought about that? It's about time that the Eurowhiners started paying for their own way. Oh, by the way, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will get rid of heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink it with filtered water. Take it every day, and you are going to help with your immune system and your endocrine system and brain function. Another great way to detoxify your body is to get the citrus deodorants or the peppermint, lavender, and tea tree deodorant. Get a couple bars for your household. It's made from essential oils, has no aluminum, no baking soda, and guess what? It helps to detoxify your body, and you use it as a daily deodorant, so it's a dual purpose. It's for males and females, and detoxifying your body regularly is super important for your immune system and endocrine system. Now, we're in the cold season. Everyone in the United States, or almost everyone in the United States, is buried under a bunch of snow. And guess what? I'm willing to bet that people are going to be getting runny noses and colds. You better start stacking up on Manuka honey and orange splash. These are structural nanosilver lozenges, very high quality. Get a few bags for your household. And if someone around you is not feeling well, you might want to be taking them even if you are feeling okay, because you want to mitigate that throat irritation and neutralize right away. I also have drops, structural nanosilver drops in blueberry, in honey and lemon, and also in cherry. Okay? Get a few bags for your household. So please go to my store, use discount 5, get $5 off any order. Click the link in the description, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer. All right, let's listen to Gordon Chang.
Life issue certainly has been front and center today and in many regards all week. There's some other things that have been happening as well this week. President Trump's efforts to acquire Greenland, for example, which he says is under threat from Russia and China, and which Denmark cannot secure from these dangers. So European leaders have pushed back against those efforts, but are they in reality ignoring a very real threat? Well, to kick things off for him today is our next guest, Gordon Chang. He's a senior fellow at Gatestone Institute and author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. And we always encourage you to follow him on X. You can do so under the handle Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always an honor to have you.
It's always an honor to talk to you, Jody. So thank you.
Well, listen, we've got a lot going on here, but let's look at this Greenland deal. Are the concerns of European leaders misplaced, do you think?
Well, certainly European leaders were more focused on their hatred for President Trump and their anger rather than on their national interests. And they've got to realize that their job is to protect their countries. And they don't have an alliance with Trump. They have an alliance with the United States. And the United States is, and they know this, the United States is the only power that can protect Greenland and Canada and the Arctic from increasing Chinese and Russian activity, because we've seen a noticeable increase in what Beijing and Moscow are doing up there, not only with their commercial activities, but also with their military flybys and with their naval patrols.
So when we look at what the president has done, and I would include in that both this term as well as the last, I don't think there's any question that he is focused on what's good for America. But in that process alone, I think what he's done is also been good for other nations. like those in Europe. What do you think?
Oh, certainly. America First is also really good for Europe. Got to remember that NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte last month said that NATO has never been stronger, and he was saying it because of what President Trump did. And he was focusing on Trump getting the organization's members to commit to spend at least 5% of their gross domestic product on their militaries. That was something which was considered almost impossible just a couple of years ago. But Trump, by threatening and by actually doing a number of things that irritated the European leaders, nonetheless got them to do what's important for their own interest. And of course, for us as well, because it is collective defense right now against militant China and Russia. So what Trump has done has been great for Europe.
Yeah, I think that's a point that needs to be communicated. Do you think the European leaders really understand that? And as you said a while ago, their real issue is they don't particularly like Trump, or I mean, certainly they're not going to walk away from their own national security over a relationship that they don't like.
No, they're not going to walk away from the United States. If you look at Europe, it was in an almost terminal slumber. Russia had invaded Ukraine twice, 2014 and 2022, and Europe was still incapable of mounting an effective defense. So really what has happened is this is a problem about Europe. And there are many, many issues in Europe right now. Some of them discussed in the National Security Strategy of the United States, which was released last month, and others as well. So really what Trump has done is he's forced the Europeans to start to take more active interest in their own defense and in protecting places like Ukraine. So this has been very good for the West. Western leaders in Europe, they don't quite understand it. At least they don't say that in public. But I think in private they do, because they know they need the United States to protect them. And they know that both sides of the Atlantic need each other.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I would agree with you. There's been a lot of discussion about the so-called Monroe Doctrine. What's your take on that?
Well, President Trump clearly has revived the Monroe Doctrine. He did that in his first term.
We have enemies. We need to take some lessons learned from Caesar. And Caesar decided, you know what? We need to destroy Gaul. And to destroy Gaul, we have to have absolute war and chop their heads off and put them on stakes. Okay? Maybe we need to start looking at our enemies in a way where we absolutely have to destroy them. Maybe we need to bolster up our military and say, you know what? We're not going to take crap from China. We're not going to take crap from Iran. And we're not going to take crap from Putin. And destroy them. And oh, by the way, why is China and Russia in our backyard? South America. There's nothing wrong with exercising power, hegemonic power. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, we're the strongest nation in the world, and we are going to exercise it. We are going to use our empire. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Why should we be giving away things to Europe? Why should we be giving away things to China? We've been doing that for 35 years. We gutted our manufacturing. And if we continue to do what the globalists want and the paper pushers want, the paper belt wants, we won't have an empire.
And clearly in the national security strategy, it's made it clear that the United States will not tolerate malign foreign interference in this region. And that's good, because we need to get the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians out of Latin America and away from our borders. But, a lot of people make a mistake. They think that because President Trump has said that he is abandoning Europe and Asia to a Chinese sphere of influence and a Russian one in Europe. But no, people need to read the national security strategy, because it makes it very clear that the United States wants Europe to be strong to protect its own interests, and it certainly does not want China to close off East Asia. So this is really good foreign policy. People who've been criticizing the national security strategy actually need to read it, because what they say in public bears very little relation to what the Trump administration has been declaring.
Yeah. Absolutely. You've mentioned China a couple of times. So while I have you, there's been reports of a wave of arrests of Chinese military officers coordinated by the Chinese Ministry of Public Security. What's going on there?
I would like to know, along with everybody else outside China and a few people inside China, but Zhang Youshao, who is the #1 uniform officer, the #1 vice chairman of the Communist Party's Central Military Commission, is reported to have been arrested. Some people think he's merely sidelined. Some people think that he will retire in March. We really don't know, but it's him and about 17 others. And that raises the question, is anybody in control of China's military right now? Because it appears that with so many people taken out of chains of...
If there is an upheaval within the military command structure, it is time for the United States to arm and to strengthen our defense mechanisms with our allied forces so we can hold Taiwan and the island chains. Now, this might be part of the reason why Trump and his military brass thought that moving the Lincoln out of the Asian theater and into the Middle Eastern theater was okay because of the instability that's happening with China right now. Now, some people think that, Xi might be toppled and we don't need to worry about Taiwan. I think we do need to worry about Taiwan because I think Xi is going to try to make his move on the first island chains to try to consolidate power as it's waning. But we'll see. Let's continue.
And that maybe nobody is running the world's biggest military, the People's Liberation Army.
Very concerning. So, real quickly, we've only got a little over a minute here. What does this development suggest to you? What's kind of the bigger picture?
Communist Party is in turmoil. Xi Jinping hasn't controlled it. These purges have gone on for years, and he's still not accomplished what he set out to do. And that means China is not stable.
And that obviously has impacts around the world. For what, for good or bad? Is this a good thing you think taking place or a dangerous thing?
I think it's dangerous.
We will only know. It means certain things like it's unlikely that China will start hostilities by launching an invasion of the main island of Taiwan because the Chinese military is not capable of that. But the Chinese military and Xi Jinping are capable of blundering into war. And when you have such a big country unstable, we will only know after it is over. And there's some pretty bad things that could happen because of this.
Wow. It's absolutely incredible what's happening all around the world. And I want to thank you, Gordon Chang, Senior Fellow at the Gatestone Institute. It is always our privilege to have you on the program and to help you unfold a lot of complicated issues happening around the globe. As always, thank you, sir, for joining us today on Washington Watch.
Well, it's been my privilege to talk to you, Jody, so thank you.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. Build some muscle so we can fight the Chinese. All right? Now, Gladiator Barley.
Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Coleman. Today's episode is all about...
All right. Please go to my store, get the Gladiator Barley. This will help to build muscle when you're doing resistance training so you can fight the commies and bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. Now, when you soak up free radicals, detoxify your body, and bring down inflammation, you're slowing down the aging process. You're also helping your immune system, your endocrine system, helping with your brain function and your cardiovascular health. Do some resistance training, take the Gladiator Barley, and you're going to build up muscle. Super important, because when you're building up muscle, especially your back, you're slowing down the aging process. When you get older, it's harder to build muscle. Well, you need to work out. Now, do a 60-35, 65-35 split. 65 resistance training, 35 cardio. Make sure you do stretching and balancing exercises to activate that cerebellum. Myotrol, super important if you're age 40 or older, to help with the gene expression to build muscle. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to be able to build up that muscle, do resistance training, all right? You'll also be able to recover quicker because of the lignans that are in here. And this will also boost up your energy levels because it's improving the health of your mitochondria. If you're an athlete, take this. Younger or older, you'll build muscle. Focus on your back muscles if you're older because they'll improve your posture, thicken and create denser bone, especially in the vertebrae. It'll improve your venous return flow for your cardiovascular health and help with lymphatic flow. So that's going to help with your immune system. A lot of people don't realize your back posture means a lot. So make sure you do some resistance training for your back muscles. You can take Myotrol by itself. You can take Gladiator by itself. But better yet, stack them together, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. But if you are an athlete, younger or older, you will benefit in your sport by taking Gladiator Barley and the Myotrol. Myotrol helps with the gene expression to build muscle. Gladiator Barley has the micronutrients and the protein to build the muscle, soak up the free radicals, bring down the inflammation, and detoxify your body. And when you do that, you get a holistic approach. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Click the link in the description, go to my store, and fight the communists.
Good journal. White-collar workers should not dismiss a blue-collar career change. It's time for those struggling with a mid-career slump to consider another path. Mike Rowe joins me. This is right up his street. You've got to be cheering this on, Mike. My question is, are you seeing a lot of people switch from white-collar to blue-collar? And if so, why?
What I'm seeing mostly, Stuart, is outreach from every major industry that I know of on a weekly basis. People call me, oftentimes industry leaders, saying, do you know where the tradespeople are? The automotive industry needs over 100,000 skilled workers immediately. Jim Farley is redoing things at Ford in a fairly dramatic fashion as we speak. Larry Fink at BlackRock talks about 400,000 to 500,000 electricians needed in his portfolio of companies alone. Granted, he's running $12.5 trillion, but that's an extraordinary need. The data center push, shipbuilding, the U.S. maritime industrial base is looking for 400,000 skilled workers alone. It goes way beyond just the construction industry. And that chart right now is telling. You know, when we think about manufacturing and when we think about, I'm rooting for the president. If he succeeds in all of this reshoring over the next couple of years, you're talking about a couple million new jobs in manufacturing. Currently, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of openings in the manufacturing sector. So that's what I'm hearing. Well, the numbers are flying all over the place, but what's really going on behind the scenes is this awareness that the skills gap is real and it's not going to close by magic.
But I take it people are moving from white-collar employment to blue-collar employment because A, there's maybe a lot of money in a blue-collar job, and B, there's maybe a good deal more stability on that job that when you've got AI running around loose.
Yeah, certainly nobody has a crystal ball, but it seems pretty clear, and I haven't talked to anybody that disagrees with the idea that the category of jobs or the cohort of workers least likely to be disrupted by AI is going to be welders and electricians and steam fitters and pipe fitters and energy workers and so forth. Look, they told us to code, right? Learn to code, they said. AI is coming for the coders. It's not yet coming for the welders. And that basic understanding has taken root. And I've heard from plenty of people, and from Amazon and UPS and a lot of places where the layoffs have been big. You hear about people retooling, rethinking, reimagining things. But look, even as that happens, we have to think differently about the way we train the next generation of skilled workers. It just makes no sense that it should take 6-7 years for a plumber to become a master plumber. You can become a thoracic surgeon in the same period of time. We have to accelerate the way we teach the skills, and we have to rethink, I think, virtually everything through a time-based rubric into something that's more meritocratic.
Yeah, I got it.
I perceive a social bias against blue-collar jobs. I mean, parents want their kids to go to the office and not the factory. Is that bias still there? Can it be changed at all?
It's still there.
Sure, that bias is a conscious choice, just like work ethic, just like gratitude. There's a bunch of stuff we can't control, but the definition of a good job and what we do socially to promote the aspirational components of a given type of vocation, that's very deliberate, that's very conscious. And for the last 40 years, I would agree, that's absolutely been on the downside. We have promoted one form of education at the expense of all the others, and consequently, one part of our workforce at the expense of the other part. That's certainly contributed to the gap that we have today. Is it changing? Yeah, for sure. But it's like turning a tanker around in the ocean. It takes time. It takes years. Look, this has become sort of a talking point of mine, but when those aforementioned people ask me if I know where the skilled workers are, I tell them honestly, yeah, they're in the 8th grade. And you have to reach them now. And you have to make your case now. Well, cold comfort for a data center that needs to hire electricians yesterday, but it doesn't change the facts.
Your foundation launched an initiative in Texas to promote skilled trades. Tell me about it.
Well, we've been at it for 17 years now, but we partnered with Wells Fargo earlier this year just to concentrate on the northern part of Texas to see just how dramatically we could move the needle with the kinds of messaging that we've been embracing for, the last 12, 13 years. The results are pretty extraordinary. When you show people a straight path to an AI-proof 6-figure job that doesn't take any debt, they listen. And they're listening harder today than they were this time a year ago, or certainly 5 years before that. In fact, I can leave you with something optimistic. My foundation, I thought we'd do $3 million this year in our work ethic scholarships. We did over $5 million. We got 10 times the applicants this year as we did the year before. I could have given away twice as much money, but that's positive. People are starting to get the message, the stigmas, the stereotypes, the myths, the misperceptions. These things, they're not bulletproof. They will crumble if you present the evidence, because the evidence demands a verdict and the facts are on our side. It's really a communication challenge, and I'm happy to tell you, I mean, you've heard me beat this drum for years, but the companies that are paying attention now to what we're doing are in a different category. I'm talking about banks. I'm talking about big investment institutions who have done the math, and they see where this is headed. And, anecdotally, 2 months ago in Plano, I met 3 electricians in a data factory, right? Basically an AI factory, one of these data centers. They're all over 25, between 25 and 30. They're all making 250 grand a year or better. And here's the crazy part. All 3 were poached at least 3 times in the 18-month period prior. So that's what's going on with electricians in Texas right now. Your experience, your zip code might vary, but in general, that's where we're headed.
That's extraordinary. Great success. Mike Rowe, you're onto something, obviously.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Support the work that I do. America's back. It's all about manufacturing and economic clustering. Collagen. Collagen is a supplement that will help to remodel your joints. So if you are having arthritis, or if you have a sports injury and you need to remodel a joint, like let's say a shoulder or elbow or knees or whatever, hip, this is a great supplement to take. Collagen works by using collagen 2 to help to remodel the cartilage. Also ACAN to help with the cushioning of the joint. Collagen also helps to inhibit MMP3 and MMP13 enzymes that degrade your joint. So you're inhibiting the destruction of the joint. And it inhibits MP4, EP4. It inhibits EP4, which produces pain. So you're inhibiting the pain, and you're reducing what is called joint rust. You're reducing the erosion of your joint. You're helping rebuild and remodel the joint. This also helps to recruit glucosamine and chondroitin. Glucosamine is super important for the cartilage and remodeling the joint, and chondroitin is important with the cushioning of the joint. So this attacks multiple vectors to help remodel and reduce the pain for your joint. So please go to my store, get the collagen. You can stack this with the collagen to help with building up your joints. This is very high quality. Go to my store and get this. Now, it's really also important to take turmeric and lignans. They both bring down inflammation, right? Turmeric will soak up free radicals and bring down that inflammation. Now, if you're bringing down inflammation, you're also helping your joints, right? Because you have chronic pain and chronic inflammation. It's important to reduce that. In addition, turmeric will help with your cardiovascular health because you're bringing down that inflammation and soaking up those free radicals and reducing plaque formation. Turmeric will help with your immune system, endocrine system, even brain function. If you have lots of inflammation at the brain level, at the neuron level, guess what? The neurons don't perform as well. They get stressed. The myelin sheath starts to degrade. You don't want that. That's really bad. Take the turmeric. It's going to bring down that inflammation and soak up those free radicals. Lignans soaks up free radicals, brings down inflammation, helps with the immune system and endocrine system. You stack these together, especially with ashwagandha root, you're slowing down the aging process. It's a very powerful stack. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, save some money. Take the supplements that I take on a regular basis to slow down the aging process. All right, we're going to go to Al Jazeera talking about why is Trump ending 80 years of U.S. foreign policy? Maybe it's time to change direction. You know, like we were listening to Mike Rowe. You know, maybe 35 years of shipping our manufacturing to China was a bad idea, and that we need to start building up our economic clustering. Maybe 80 years of the New World Order, it's time to change. Maybe it's time to, rethink it.
Hi, I'm Steve Cummings, and I have a question. A year into his second term, is Donald Trump's foreign policy making the United States stronger or weaker? Let's get to the bottom line. It's not just Venezuela, and it's not just Greenland. It's not even Iran. Everything the world assumed about U.S. foreign policy has just been tossed out the window in the first year of the second term of President Donald Trump. Allies have been insulted. Europeans have been told they're not European enough. A new Middle East has been declared, and competition with China has just taken a back seat to domination of the Western Hemisphere, at least this week. Everyone's been put on notice that a new sheriff's in town, and the old set of assumptions about America's role in the world is just gone. So as Trump presses reset on just about everything, is he making America stronger?
Yes.
Is he bringing radical, much-needed change? How many America First policies might look like success now, but lead to damage down the road? Or vice versa? Today we're talking with Christian Whiten, a former senior advisor at the U.S. State Department in the Bush and Trump administration, and he's author of Smart Power, Between Diplomacy and War. Christian, thank you so much for being with us. Look, I came across an article that you wrote in a journal called American Greatness, and it was really your review of the national security strategy issued by the Trump administration. Christian, I'm interested in what you see as the positive case of Donald Trump in this phase of focusing on Europe.
Well, thanks, Steve. It's great to be with you.
Get Europe to buy our weapons and stop the United States citizens' taxpayer dollars subsidizing Europe. Why should Germany get a free ride in their education? Why should Germany have better health care? Why? They should be paying for their defense. They've been doing this for decades. It's time for them to get off of the tit of the Statue of Liberty.
I think it's a fundamentally sort of direct, honest, sometimes brazen foreign policy, and that's reflected by this national security strategy. You may recall in Trump's first term, there was a much longer, more elaborate, more polished national security strategy. It was shepherded by Nadia Shadlow, who's now at the Hudson Institute. A cynic might ask if Donald Trump ever read it. It was clearly written by me. I think it was.
Donald Trump's first term, he surrounded himself with a bunch of deep staters. Thank God he woke up.
Compelling. But this document, which again, I'm not 100% sure has Trump's direct fingerprint on it, but I think does at least.
It certainly sounds like President Trump. Like if you read it, it sounds like him.
It's it's definitely direct. It is direct on Europe, and I think along with getting us out of sideshow wars in the Middle East, which was an objective of Trump in his first time, somewhat fulfilled, somewhat unfulfilled. That just being blunt and direct and honest. And we're constantly told that NATO is the most successful alliance in history, with apologies to the big three who won World War II, or the Dealing League in Athens or something like that. There are alternatives here. Just to be honest about who's helpful to us, who's helpful to the challenges of the future. And it's not Europe. If you look at Europe, Europe is in a politically precarious position. The heavyweights, Germany, France, the UK, all have deeply unpopular governments, are almost certain to flip to populists in their next elections if they're allowed to. And is that really what we need to confront the challenges of today, which might be the flow of illegal drugs into the United States or might be China? It's not. And I think, whether it's this strategy or Vice President Vance's speech in Munich or what's going on with Greenland, we're seeing some honesty, some brutal honesty in our foreign policy.
I mean, what I think is underlined in the national security strategy, which is uncomfortable for many, it's uncomfortable for me, honestly, is where it talks about civilizational erasure in Europe, which is another way of saying, that those that are white Europeans are being challenged by those coming in, or maybe the kind of fundamentals of culture, on issues that deal with race.
Wake up! Look at what's happening in London. It's a lot. It's not English anymore. Look at what's happening in Paris. It's not French anymore. Look at what people have been complaining about in Germany. There's been an influx from the Middle East and from other countries that's changing the fabric of their culture. So what Trump said is 100% right. And then we can take a look at what's happening in New York. New York is changing radically. Look at the way the country was in the 1970s for New York. Let's from a United States point of view here. In New York in the 1970s and compare it to today, totally different. Runaway immigration destroys your culture. Secondly, take a look at what's happening in Michigan with Hamtramck, with Dearborn. They're more Muslim than some Muslim countries. Something's wrong here. If you want to have a civilization, you have to have controlled immigration. You have to have a set of rules that states that it's about an amalgamation, it's about adopting the culture of the host country and not turning it into your own shithole.
And multi-ethnic societies, which we've not seen this level of tension about before.
You can have you can have multi-ethnic societies. The thing is that with controlled immigration, it's about them assimilating. You can have multi-ethnicity, but with assimilation. The problem that's happening here is that the assimilation isn't taking place, partially due to they don't want to assimilate, and due to the high inflows to these countries, like France and England, and parts of the United States. If you have high inflows of a certain type of ethnicity from a certain country, guess what? You create a ghetto. and you're not going to get the assimilation that you want. America works because of assimilation. You can be multi-ethnic, but you have assimilation. If you don't have assimilation, then guess what? You have a problem. You lose your country. You lose your culture. And that's what Trump is saying about Europe. With unfettered access and the woke agenda and the super ultra liberalism, it literally destroyed Western culture, Western civilization. Now, do you want Middle Eastern civilization or do you want Western civilization? Now, the last 500 years, Western civilization provided a lot in terms of technology, in terms of finance, in terms of culture. We're going to throw that all away if we have unfettered immigration policies. So Trump is 100% right. There's nothing wrong with multi-ethnicity in a society. The problem is, what is the take rate of assimilation?
The table, not open to discussion, are on the table, at least in the United States. I think, and Vance may have mentioned this specifically in his Munich speech, if you look at Britain and the censorship there, where you have people not being locked up. I mean, this is the criticism, that they're not being tough on these Muslim immigrants who have no intention whatsoever of integrating into British society. Instead of cracking down on that, instead of getting a handle on migration, which has really brought the Labour government to a very low level of popularity, instead you're locking up people in Britain for tweets that others find offensive, things that in the United States would have just complete First Amendment free speech protection. If you look at France, opposition politicians have been essentially canceled for saying things that are considered not politically correct, not acceptable, or racially insensitive. And you have these societies that do not appear to have any confidence in themselves, which I would have described as the United States before Donald Trump was elected. People who are so focused on self-loathing, how they're supposedly inherently racist, a patriarchy, a racist imperialist history. And I think what Trump did and wants to do is cast that aside, and he wants Europe to do that too. Because for allies to have strength, I mean, look at Japan, look at the Gulf monarchies, for example. These are cultures, look at Russia, these are cultures that have confidence in themselves. And I don't think you see that in Europe. And the question is, are these people really our allies in a cultural sense?
Is it smart to have adopted an America First strategy now, rather than lament the old order, basically wreck the old order and come out? And I have to tell folks, I'm not advocating that. I'm just sort of looking hypothetically in an open mind. I don't believe the old system was working either. So, I mean, where do you see it, Christian?
Well, there's the old analogy of Hernan Cortez, who burned his ships, he's a conquistador, in order to motivate his men. There's no going home, there's no going back. Could we have kept up our membership, not just in the United Nations, but all of its subsidiaries? Could we have remained a member of the International Framework on Climate Change and the COP and the annual sort of hootenanny about climate change, where we all talk and pledge to unrealistic goals about reducing carbon emissions? All of these things, or do you want to actually start sort of framing everything toward the years ahead, where we realize that the UN hasn't solved anything? As you sort of alluded to, you have a Security Council that doesn't have India or Brazil, but does for some reason still have France and Britain. And when has the UN really solved anything as far as the United States is concerned? I think you really have to go back to the Korean War, when the Soviets didn't occupy their seat, when it was really decisive. And so in moving away from these things, and he hasn't actually pulled out, somewhat surprisingly to me, you can pull out of NATO without pulling out of NATO. You can just start decreasing troop dispatches, stop signing those orders, or have your Secretary of Defense stop doing that and slow walk NATO into a lower status. Trump hasn't done that yet. That might be coming. We'll see if this Greenland crisis does it. But at any rate, dispensing with the pretense. Also, there was this view in the Obama administration, it came from Hillary Clinton, just that the sheer number of meetings and diplomats was in itself a good thing, and any decrease to that, to the 70,000 employees at the State Department, its massive budget was bad. Less diplomacy is bad. It's less international rules-based international order, which I don't think ever actually.
Why not shrink these departments? Instead of saying we need more meetings and more management, why don't you just shrimp it? Why can't we use informational technology and dashboards and shrink government? It doesn't need to be that big. Why does the State Department need 70,000 individuals if that's the case? I don't know how many they have, but it's a lot. Why do they need that? We don't need that many people for the State Department. A lot of inefficiency.
So I think Trump, especially in the second term, cut through from a lot of the establishmentarians, is willing to turn his back on that. One thing I'd add, though, is that he isn't just upsetting the globalists and the sort of establishment uniparty in Washington, Republican and Democrat, all the generals, all the people got fancy degrees from Harvard, but also the Tucker Carlsons of the world, because what he's doing in Venezuela and what he's doing in regard to Iran also is defying what people were thinking or hoping that he might be an isolationist or non-interventionist. So I'd say he's taking an interesting path.
I'm going to raise Venezuela. I don't think many people thought that you could get away with essentially, I don't know how to call it, regime change without regime change. You could walk in, do grab and go with the president, leave everything in place, take over the oil fields and sort of do it in a kind of it's a combination of a might makes right neo-mercantilist frame, and that's so antithetical to the role the United States purported to be about before, which was a system of international law and a rules-based order. Which do you think is going to yield better fruit for the United States and the world down the road?
Yeah, I think on both counts, for both subjects, they're better off under the Trump system. I argued, first of all, I'd say with Venezuela, it's sort of Noriega plus oil. There is some precedent for doing a snatch and grab. I don't think that you have a huge downside to dispensing with what I think is a fiction of the rules-based international order. The first Trump term, I saw that on stuff going to the White House. I'd try and remove it. Usually unsuccessfully. I'd say there is no such thing. There is the U.S. military, U.S.-led alliances. There's our economic power, allied stuff. So believing that in fact, since 1945, we've constructed this thing, the hope of Nuremberg, the hope of the UN, that will move away from the previous 2,500 years of recorded history and achieve something different. We're back to, I think, the realization that human nature hasn't been repealed in the way that nations deal with each other. It's not pure might makes right, but I think it's a little more honest and certainly in the interest of the U.S. And this is going to sound arrogant, but especially within our own hemisphere, I think what's good for us often is going to be good for others, not for the drug cartels, not for the government of Venezuela. But we have an opportunity. I don't know if the Mexicans will see it this way, but I know the administration is leaning on them to let us deal with the cartels for them. Mexico would benefit from not having a parallel government that's unelected, that's run by thugs in the form of cartels. It's an opportunity for them to dispense with these people. It's an opportunity for Colombia's government to say, okay, enough with the cocaine producers. We're going to actually have government. And for Venezuelan people, I think it's pretty clear from their sort of hopeful reactions to the ouster of Maduro what they would want to happen.
Do you see the challenge of China today as a defining challenge for the United States?
I do, yes. I think it's really the only country that can end the United States of America. For the longest time, it was sort of presumed that their economy would overtake us. It's just a matter of time, but their model seems to have been maxed out so far. And but just, we don't actually know if they're good at fighting, and I hope we never have to find out. But as far as having the technology, the money, and the manpower to really change the way America is. Certainly Russia is a threat. Russia with its nuclear arsenal, a very major and serious competitor, adversary. But China really does seem to be the king daddy. And that is, perhaps this is why you brought it up, it does seem to be downplayed a bit in this first year of Trump.
Which is why Greenland is so confusing to me, because I don't know if that is the defining challenge and you're going to order that at the top level of your priorities. Wouldn't you want to order the Western Hemisphere? Wouldn't you want to order your transatlantic relationship? Wouldn't you order NATO and what you're doing on AI around that challenge?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. With Greenland, I think there's a little bit more than meets the eye. I mean, it is a bit about Russia and China. I think it might be about rare earths. But in seeing the Europeans defend themselves, it's also sort of just again this realization that these people who assure us that they are our greatest allies and have some significant power. I don't know. It's very difficult to see it in reality. And when it comes to AI, again, I hate to sound like an arrogant American here. I'm not a huge fan of everything Silicon Valley does, but it does seem we've been very lucky in this case. Maybe it's not luck that the major AI companies are American. And even the chip companies. Of course, there's much made of TSMC and most of their high-tech stuff coming from Taiwan, but NVIDIA, who designs the material, is American. TSMC is going to be induced to move a lot of production onshore to Arizona as far as the trade deal with Taiwan goes. So I don't know, as I look at sort of the AI race, I'm not sure. I think Europe probably could contribute, but I don't see it happening.
So which president do you think we really have? Is it one who's going to be more of a military interventionist? We're sitting on the verge maybe of something in Iran. What do you think?
I would just copy Walter Russell B and say it's basically Jacksonian. So neither interventionist more, but not non-interventionist. I think it looks realistically at what the threats are, and the threats aren't sideshow, certainly not nation building that is desired, wanted, or would be beneficial. We can go in the Middle East when ISIS rears its head. Of course, you want to smack it down. Those were some of the most disgusting and evil people in the world. Everyone seemed to agree with that. But like Jackson, who invaded Spanish Florida and who went to the brink of war with France, it's someone who is hesitant to recognize, or at least not eager to recognize, someone or something as an adversary, but who will move energetically when one is identified. So it's an economy, of course, until you sort of decide you have to do something, and then it's the overwhelming force. Jackson wasn't the only one. I think you could call some of what Theodore Roosevelt described in Speak Softly and Carry a Big Stick. Of course, Trump doesn't speak softly. Just quickly on the Nobel thing, that does bewilder me a little bit. Why Donald Trump cares about that? Why he cares about a group of Norwegians who decide who is worthy of this award that President Obama received before he really actually did much of anything. This goes to a streak in Donald Trump. Why did he let Bob Woodward run around the White House in the first time? Why did he give pretty significant access to Maggie Haberman in the first term from the New York Times, who put out consistently bad stuff about him, whether right or wrong? Trump does have this longing, and you of course see this in other iconoclasts and outsiders, that they wouldn't actually mind a nod of approval from the insiders, from the establishment, even if they don't want to join them. It seems silly to me. It seems like you're trying to join a country club that doesn't want you for who you are, and you should tell them just to take a hike.
One of the things we see in the Quinnipiac polls, we see it in Gallup polls right now, is a kind of growing antipathy, to Donald Trump's leadership on a number of fronts. Part, foreign policy, national security. There is not overwhelming support. If you look at whether it's demonstrating greater U.S. leadership in the world under Trump, those that think it's stronger is 42%. Those that think it's weaker is 46%. Those in the middle, about 10%. What do Americans think of U.S. moral authority in the world under Trump? Stronger, 34%. Weaker, 50%. So I guess my question to you is, do you think there are blind spots out there for the president, much like there was for President Bush, by not reading these numbers closely?
No, I think the hope and the counter argument would be that this is sort of like 1983 economically and in foreign policy. Ronald Reagan was considered by many people, and Margaret Thatcher as well, for being a big meanie, for being blunt, for being extremely critical, for turning the page, if you will, on détente. Say, no, we're not going to aim for peaceful coexistence. We're going to aim actually for success in that reference. It was against the Soviet bloc, and it takes time for these things to bear any fruit. 1983 also is the year the economy turned around, although that wouldn't be apparent until the following year, which luckily was the year Ronald Reagan faced re-election. The economy recovered, inflation was down, and he won 49 out of 50 states, Trump doesn't face re-election. But for those of us who believe that his combination of supply side stimulus through tax cuts, tariffs, some blue collar, middle class tax cuts will actually bear fruit, has already started to, but will become apparent to the electorate in time for the next presidential election. But also that the steps he took, again with Ronald Reagan, it was the authorization of the MX missile, the B-1 bomber, Ticonderoga, and eventually Burt-class destroyers, and the Strategic Defense Initiative, derided as Star Wars. Trump actually doing something very similar to that with the Golden Dome missile defense system. These things are bound to upset our adversaries, upset people who are already a little skeptical of America, in Europe in particular. And the question is, does it really matter that when the electorate decides to go to the polls, will they still vote on economic performance, which we're thinking is going to be good?
Yeah, it's
And,
going to be economic.
Foreign policy doesn't really
It's going to
help
be economic.
you. It didn't help George H.W. Bush in 1992. It was only, a year off of an astounding victory in the Gulf War. It can hurt you, but as long as there's nothing going terribly wrong, like Iraq, then you'll be okay.
Steve Witkoff, the president's negotiator on many things, issued a tweet that says phase two. It says phase two. The president, on behalf of President, we're announcing the launch of phase two of the president's 20-point plan to end the Gaza conflict, et cetera, on ceasefire, demilitarization, technocratic governance, and reconstruction. Goes through. It's a long tweet. I'm kind of used to a line of over-promising on Gaza, walking away, letting it sleep, but he's continuing to raise this as a defining challenge in ways that I know Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't even like, right? So I'm just interested in how President Trump has changed and whether or not one of the barometers of success of Donald Trump's foreign policy is in a very interesting and surprising way going to be this conflict or not.
Yeah, part of what I think Trump is doing here is disregarding the entire foreign policy establishment, intelligence bureaucracy that received wisdom. A friend who left the administration joked, critically, not critically, that it's being run by about 6 people, being held very, very close to the top. And there's some good in that, and there's some bad in that. Insularity provides some protection, but also leads you to do some dumb things that you might have been steered away from. So on Israel, the received wisdom forever was you have to solve Israel-Palestine, and then some of the other problems in the Middle East start to go away. The reverse of that is actually that Iran is the chief aggressor, threat, political subversion tool in the region, and that solving that or backfooting the Iranian regime leads to better success elsewhere. And the evidence for that would be the Abraham Accords, basically. At least that's the way Trump sees things. Nonetheless, I'm actually a little bit bewildered by the expectation that what they have planned for Gaza will work. I just don't understand who's going to provide security. They have this hope that someone will step up. There's no way American troops are going into Gaza. I think the Israelis and Trump and Witkoff have hoped someone else would step up, but the Gulfies are not willing to, understandably, because, and nor is Egypt. I mean, so the question is not, okay, you're going to provide peace. Well, who's going to create peace? And then are you just securing peace? The question is, okay, well, what happens when Palestinians point the gun at you? If you are an Arab peacekeeping force, are you going to shoot back? What happens if they just throw rocks? What happens if they just block roads? What happens if they're just engaged in political subversion of the kind that we inexplicably allowed to go on in Iraq right under our nose? There was some hope of maybe the Indonesians coming in. They would be a Muslim majority country that's not Arab. They do have some experience in Africa with going into difficult situations. But until you sort of answer the question of who disarms Hamas and what replaces it, both in the military and political sense, I just don't understand how you get away from Israel's just going to end up going back into this, and it's not going to be stable, secure, anything.
I just want to come back to Greenland for a minute, which I used to sort of think was sort of a humorous side joke. No longer. Like it's a serious deal. President is continuing to reaffirm his desire to make sure that Greenland is under the full control of the United States. I'm interested in how you see that, whether you think Donald Trump is essentially negotiating the world and that you fall back to something less damaging to NATO, to the transatlantic relationship, or whether Greenland is the spear through which the United States will destroy NATO.
I think it's the other thing you mentioned, which is a maximalist position that Trump has taken, but probably won't pursue. And again, here I think Trump is ahead of the rest of his cabinet and the people who sort of have to assemble the policies, which ultimately means enticing Greenlanders to make the decision to join the United States. And of course, the representative and the Danish foreign minister were in Washington saying that that's not going to happen. We don't want that. But I think if you start to explain, and this is another problem, the US government is terrible at this. You know, I know the Russians others think we're awesome at color revolutions and we know how to do political warfare. I think the CIA has either been out of the business of political warfare or terrible at it. Maybe they're good at the beginning, 1948 elections in Italy. I would argue, in a distinct minority, I would argue that 1953 in Iran was actually a success for the CIA in America. But going to Greenland and saying, listen, you're going to have a trust fund like Alaskans have, where your family is going to get money from royalties from oil and gas extraction and from other mineral extraction. We're going to guarantee that that account has at least, let's say, $1 million per family within 5 years of becoming a territory and commonwealth. And also, you can have a Puerto Rico style deal, which means you're a commonwealth. You have all the protections of being in the United States, but you don't have to pay income taxes. And you can be like an Indian tribe, a Native American tribe, where you can actually control who moves in. I don't think thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans are going to move to Greenland once they realize how far away it is and how cold it is. But if Greenlanders are afraid of being overwhelmed, anyway, making some of these positive arguments for Greenland, I think would be good. And they're just starting to do that now. And then just to answer the rest of your question, I don't think Trump is being totally cynical, meaning that what he says about Russian incursion, Chinese incursion into Greenland is a total lie. But I do think there is some of what's not being told, that he would like Greenland to be added to the United States to elevate him as a historical figure. It would make America the second biggest country geographically after Russia. Not a lot of people remember Andrew Johnson being the president when Alaska joined the Union, but nonetheless, this would cement Trump further in the history books.
Well, listen, I found this a fascinating conversation. Christian Whiten, former senior advisor in the Bush and Trump administration. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Steve.
So what's the bottom line? Over the past...
We'll find out. But please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost will help with your brain function, your cardiovascular health, your musculature, rev up your metabolism, increase your energy levels, slow down the aging process, help with your immune system and endocrine system. Take it every day. You'll notice the effects of this within 72 hours. You're going to have a steady burn of energy, have more vitality, and you take this regularly, you will see that your body is improving, your immune system and your endocrine system is improving, your brain function is improving. You'll be able to concentrate better, you'll be able to sleep better. So please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost will also help to control your A1C levels, super important. And get the C60. You can stack it with the Boomer Boost is a great stack. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT coconut oil. Now, C60 needs to be in an oil for proper absorption. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach. Take it every day, teaspoon a day, and it's going to soak up free radicals in the cell and around the cells and in your tissues. Reduce stress in the tissues, bring down inflammation, soak up those free radicals. Your mitochondria is going to improve, your ATP will increase, your metabolism will improve for the cells and the tissues, your organ systems will improve, your immune system and your endocrine system will improve. By soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing the chances of plaque formation and you're improving your brain function. Soaking up free radicals is a major way to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, take a teaspoon a day, every day. This will also help with your basal layer. Stack it with resveratrol for synergistic effects and your skin will improve. By taking this a day, every day, for a year, you will look younger. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60, slow down the aging process.
Year, the traditional U.S. foreign policy establishment has just been shaken to its core. The men and women who make up that establishment, former officials and diplomats and academics, the media, only see value in the organizations created by the United States after World War II. But honestly, did the World Trade Organization help make trade between weak countries and strong countries more fair? Did the UN Security Council ever expand its permanent members since 1945? Was NATO floundering before Russia invaded Ukraine? Paralysis and inertia were built into America's foreign policy thinking well before Trump. He may be speeding up history, but he didn't start these trends. Not all Americans agree with their government's policies, foreign and domestic, but it's definitely America's plastic moment. The patterns of the past are crashing down and new ideas are being tried in real time, abruptly and uncomfortably. That's how the future looks like it's going to be. And that's the bottom line.
The bottom line is this. For the last 35 years, because of globalization, we have gutted our manufacturing. We've lost our economic prowess. We have higher debt to GDP ratios. We've lost our manufacturing clustering to even have a sustained war effort. It's time to bring it back and make America great again. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.